Hello everyone, we are now on our 5th Chats with Chels. So today I have Erin Stapleton from Erin Stapleton Environmental Consulting. So on today's episode we are drinking an environmentally sustainable beer who cultivates earthworms apparently. So thank you Storm Brewing. So Erin?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about Erin Stapleton Environmental Consulting.
Well, I started my business in March of this year. Prior to that, I was an environmental consultant as well. It's the only job I've ever known. So I was working with larger consulting firms and smaller consulting firms, and was really learning a lot and really enjoying the work, and knew that was it for me. But I started my own business for a number of reasons. One of them was because of the economy. So I was working a lot in Western Canada. That's actually where I started my career. Though I'm from here, I moved out to Calgary to do my master's degree and just stayed because at the time the Alberta economy was just booming and there was so much work to be done. And so it was a great time to be there to start my career. But, over the last couple of years, as we know, the Alberta economy, the Newfoundland and Labrador economy took a bit of a downturn. And so I was laid off from my job in Calgary.
So you became an entrepreneur by necessity?
Yes. So it was interesting because for a while, for about the last 2 years of being an employee, I kind of had this, ever-growing voice in my head just saying, is this really what you want to do? You're still in your early 30s. You've got a long career ahead of yourself. I wasn't entirely happy, but I just kept going. As I said, I'd always been a consultant. I'd always been an employee. And especially when there's a regular paycheck, it's hard to give that up. And so I guess it was out of necessity eventually, but it was kind of the push I needed to actually listen to that little voice and be like, all right, well, the decision has now been made for me, so go for it.
So how do you silence that fearful voice? What is it that, drives you to take the risk rather than, looking for another environmental consulting job?
Yes, that's a good question. And I think that changes like any entrepreneur, no matter what, area of business you're in. I think every day, some days you're really loving being a solopreneur or, an entrepreneur. And then other days you're like,
do your accounting.
Yeah. Other days you're like, I haven't paid myself in 6 weeks. Wouldn't it be great to go have a real job and get, that steady pay again? But I think fundamentally what keeps me going is that there are definitely tough days, but really I do love, I love what I do. I've always loved consulting, but now I get to do it in a slightly different way. So I'm getting to work with startup companies, which I've never been able to do when I was working with a larger consulting firm. I'm working in renewable energy, which is the sector that I never got to work in otherwise. And so
probably not a popular sector in the oil economies.
There are pockets of interested individuals, and luckily it is taking off now that there's more of a global awareness of the necessity of renewable energy. But so what keeps me going is that, I still love what I do, but I'm getting to work with the clients and the projects that I'm really passionate about. So that's really what gets me up every morning.
So when you get up in the morning, every now and again I see Erin here at Common Ground. So That's a co-working space. So when you started your business, were you working from coffee shops, working from your house, working from your phone? I don't know.
Yeah, so I actually, when I was still an employee for the Calgary-based company, I had actually already moved back to Newfoundland, but I was a teleworker. So I was working out of a home office. So in my house, I do have a room with a door that's a dedicated office space. It's not used for anything else in our home except for my workplace, which helped keep the divide between, work and life. So I was used to, prior to becoming an independent consultant, I was used to working from a home office. So once I started my own business, that wasn't a challenge. I'd already been accustomed for many years to working from home. But a big change was the social aspect. So when I was working as an employee, I still got to travel out to Calgary quite frequently. We had, Skype calls and instant messenger and of course, many phone calls or what have you. So I was still very much connected to the workplace community. But working then on my own, it was just me. I didn't have a team. Like I had the other consultants I was working with or my clients, but there certainly was that lack of interaction. So that's what brought me here to Common Ground. Yeah.
So how do you, besides, being in a co-working space, how did you, combat loneliness when you were starting out?
I just networking. It was necessary not only from a business standpoint, because that's how you get people to know about who you are and what you do and what you can offer. But for me, part of it was just socialization. So it was kind of like, accomplishing two goals through the one activity. And so a lot of, especially at the beginning and even now still, and I think any business owner will tell you, and I'm sure you can relate, we're always out there networking. Sometimes it's just passively getting to, meet other people. And then sometimes, of course, it's with a very defined purpose, but it's always a key piece of business. It never stops.
So for someone like me, I go to these networking events and I just freak out. I don't know. I get so anxious. I went to an event a couple weeks ago and I ran into Mark Talbot and I was like, you have really great tweets and I love your dad's book. And I was like, he's tall, a lot taller in person than I thought. And I was like, okay, well, I don't have anything else to say, so this conversation is really awkward now and I don't know what to do. So, what do you do to, keep those conversations flowing? What are your top networking strategies?
Right. So one, I can appreciate that networking can be difficult. Luckily, I take after my dad. Finding things to talk about with complete strangers has never been an issue. So thanks, Dad, for that. But I get it. Entering into a room full of strangers, especially if you're attending the event on your own, can be daunting. But the thing is, I guess, number one, you just have to remember that there's a lot of people in that room just like you. So, you're not alone. So what I tend to talk about, I actually don't talk about business first. And this is just my, personal approach, but I always like to start with things like, tell me about your family. Do you have any pets? If they're holding an identifiable beer, oh, you're drinking an IPA, those are my favorite. Have you tried? So on and so forth. Or if someone's wearing something really interesting, like a cool tie or an awesome pair of shoes or something. I know it sounds kind of superficial, but anything just kind of casual to break the ice, because I think it's kind of awkward. And to me, it's almost a bit too abrasive if someone approaches me and right away gives me their pitch. Yeah, I think it's a bit disingenuous. Yeah. And so I'd rather get to know you a little bit and then be like, oh, and Chels, by the way, what's your business? Tell me about it.
I mostly just pet my dog.
Yeah.
I pet my dog all the time. His name's Buddy.
Pets are always a safe bet for sure.
But then you have those people who are like, I don't have any pets and I don't like cats or dogs and I also don't have a soul, so it's fine.
Well, you know what? And just for those people, it's just it was great talking to you. I'm seeing another colleague over here. I'm going to stop by and say hi. And maybe that's not even true, but you're right. Sometimes a conversation is not going anywhere for any multitude of reasons, and you just politely make your exit, and that's okay.
I'm very grateful for those tips because I'm the worst at networking. So if any of you guys see me at an event,
take it easy on her.
Yeah, take it easy. Just ask me about my dog and I'll tell you all about him and probably show you 12 pictures. We might never get anywhere else except for pictures of my dog, but chances are I'm panicking on the inside.
Yeah.
So one of the networking things, this is how I met Erin, was here at Common Ground. Mm-hmm. So what is it about co-working that drew you in?
Definitely addressing my need to be social. So I didn't come here with the idea that there'll be potential clients here. That was not on my mind at all. I just wanted a place where I knew there would be other people like me, whether they be people working remotely for other companies in various places around the world, people like you who are, working on their own business as well. There's a lot of interesting students here working on, undergrads or masters or PhDs and working on all sorts of interesting things that are way above my knowledge level. And people
every time Matthew talks about it, one of our friends is doing biomedical engineering.
Yeah, but really an interesting guy.
Yeah.
And so it's been great because even though, and it's kind of refreshing actually, that there's not many people in the space that do exactly what I do. And so that, I learn new things. I don't have, blinders on to what other things are happening in the world in different sectors. And it's just nice to eat lunch in the lunchroom and have interesting conversations with interesting people and the supportive community as well. So we're all working on different things and different businesses, and but we all help each other out. So I get to be on your podcast with you, and another co-working member, Kayla Walters, has done some graphic design for me, and it's just a wonderful supportive community. Everyone will do what they can to help you out, even if it's just letting you vent for 10 minutes over a coffee in the break room.
Or a beer.
or a beer, that's right. And so it's great. It's just a supportive community of people who are here for you, help you out whatever way they can. Awesome place to be.
So I guess for those of you who don't know of the 700 million other things that I do, I'm actually a biochemistry student. So I'm kind of in the STEM field as well.
Yeah.
So I know that there's like a lot of talk, in both STEM and entrepreneurship. I recently heard an interesting phrase, and it was, you can't be what you can't see. So, there's a lack of visibility of women entrepreneurs, women in the STEM field, and particularly women entrepreneurs in the STEM field. So what has that been like for you?
Never a dull moment. My undergrad I did here in St. John's in biology. And so with biology, I found probably of all the sciences, don't get mad at me if this is not exactly correct, but I felt, and when I looked around my classes, I definitely saw a pretty even split. Dare I say even slightly more females. So I think of all the STEMs, I definitely am in the one that's probably like most female, and maybe like with psychology and stuff as well. And then when I did my master's degree, that's when it started to slightly tilt towards definitely being more male than female. And then once I got out into the workforce, environmental consulting, again, is pretty good, like 50-50 split when it comes to, numbers of employees. But of course, as with, many sectors, definitely a lot more males in leadership roles. And in the sectors that I work within, so mining, electric utilities, that kind of thing, absolutely male dominated. It's just the way it is. So while throughout school, I didn't really consider, being a woman in STEM to be anything novel or whatever. But once I actually got out working, I realized there's really not, there's more guys in my working world, which is fine. I've had many wonderful male colleagues, and some very critical mentors and advocates of mine throughout my career had been just coincidentally guys. So they've certainly been supporters of me as a female in this male-dominated world. But then there's also the occasional barrier that I encounter, where it's kind of a combination of two things. So one is the perception that I'm inexperienced. So I'm 35 years old.
I know it's hard to believe, right?
Thanks, Mom. Mom gave me the good genes.
I literally just never believed that.
And so I find, and you being a young female as well, you can relate that if you look young, you're automatically assumed to be young and inexperienced, not much to offer, still learning, which of course, we're all learning at all stages of our career. I don't care if you're 15 or 95. So there is a little bit of that. I always, I shouldn't have to do this, but I always feel compelled to very loudly state my age when I'm first getting to know someone, so they realize that I am coming from, 10 years in this business and multiple degrees as well.
That's how she starts her networking events. Hi, I'm Erin. I'm in my 30s.
I'm 35. Show them my ID. Not really. And the other part is, I guess, depending on the sector, being a female at the table is also sometimes you're the odd one out. So I do sometimes find myself being sometimes the only female and the only person under 40. So that in some instances is great because people are like, oh, well, you're a voice that we haven't heard yet. Please share with us your views. Please, please, please. We need some new ideas, new blood, fresh perspective. In other circumstances, my presence has been met with, who are you? Why are you here? Are you the student? Are you on an internship? Are you the secretary? So even though in my head sometimes I'm screaming, I always just, politely smile and, give them my 30-second of who I am and what it is that I do and what I'm here to offer. So all things considered, my experience has been overall a good one. It's just a matter of just knowing that, those situations will come up and just kind of knowing how to civilly and politely navigate them.
Well, that sounds like a tough one for sure. So you are an environmental consultant, which means it sounds like you have a little bit of a passion for the environment.
Yes.
So I always like to finish out these podcasts with, some tips that people can apply to their day-to-day lives. So I guess you kind of see the brunt of what happens when, as individuals and companies, we are a little bit too irresponsible. So what are some ways that we can incorporate environmental concern and stability and sustainability into our lives?
Right. So one of the sectors that I'm really involved in is marine renewable energy, specifically offshore wind. If you follow me on any of my social media, I'm a very loud and proud advocate of harnessing offshore wind here in Atlantic Canada. So I think energy use is a really easy one, really, for us to, on an individual basis, think about. So, I have a really old house in downtown St. John's. It's beautiful. It's more than 100 years old. But, the insulation was, when I bought the house, was put in, years prior. It wasn't up to what's currently now the acceptable level of insulation. Things like changing from a manually adjusted thermostat to a programmable one. Maybe look up our friends over at MISA, MYSA. They actually have a smart thermostat that you can use with your baseboard heaters. Awesome tool. You can, have an energy audit done. If you need a referral to someone who does that, I have another female entrepreneur who offers that service. And so she can walk with you throughout your home, check out your insulation, your hot water tank, your windows, and work with you to make sure that your home is as efficient as it can be before you start thinking of these crazy things like, I'm going to set up a solar panels or I'm going to get a mini split. Those are great things too, but a lot of our homes are all not even doing the basic things that we can do to conserve our energy consumption. So that's just kind of to me, an easy one that's really accessible to anybody to think about.
I know Take Charge NL.
Exactly.
If you're here in Newfoundland, they offer tons of rebates. So they even have some Black Friday special rebates for appliances. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a really great thing to look into too. So those are some great ways to incorporate a little bit more social and environmental responsibility into our day-to-day lives.
Absolutely.
So we're going to thank Erin for coming in and having a great chat. And
thanks for having me.
Having a great beer today.
Mm-hmm.
So would love if you guys would subscribe to this podcast through YouTube or iTunes, however you're listening. And we will see you again soon.
See ya. Thanks.